Congratulations! You have come so far. We have been going through the Bible book by book, and this week we are near the end of the history of the Old Testament. We're not at the end of the Bible just yet, but what's going to happen now is that story is going to be filled in with wisdom and writings and prophets, and then Jesus comes. But in terms of the history and the facts of Israel's history, we're in a late period now. And so no matter how you've come so far, you can jump in right now. It's a great time with two short books that aren't real hard to read, Ezra and Nehemiah. These two books, Ezra and Nehemiah, tell the same story from two different perspectives. And so they tell of a time when God's people had been in Babylon for quite some time. They had been defeated, most of them carted off to exile. And it's a time when they started to come back. They started to come back and rebuild the crumbling walls, rebuild the foundation of the temple, rebuild their faith, rebuild their traditions and their festivals. And they're so inspiring to read about how they walked into the rubble and had the hope and the faith and the perseverance, more than anything else, to rebuild. Nehemiah is one of my favorite books of the Bible. It has the line, "The joy of the Lord is our strength." And that's what Nehemiah said to keep the people energized as they did this hard, dangerous work, as enemies around them didn't want them to rebuild, at least not in the way that they wanted to. And so Nehemiah is a story in which we can find ourselves, and we can find inspiration for the hard work when we need to rebuild our lives and our communities. And so in my Sunday sermon, I'm telling the story of Nehemiah. But for those of you that are reading along, I want to talk to you a little bit about Ezra, because he's a fascinating figure in biblical history, in the history of how we got our Bible. When you start to study how the Bible came together, the study of the canon, it's a fascinating study, and there's a lot that most of us regular people don't know. And what you find out is a lot of the Bible was actually written during what's called the exilic period, the period of the exile. And so when these people were exiled, they were trying to hold on to the little fragments of their faith, and they started to gather the fragments of their writings and actually put them down, to write down the songs that everybody knew, to write down the laws that had been codified, to write down the stories that they told around campfires. And so it's possible that Ezra, the priest and scribe, was responsible for a lot of what we call our Old Testament. He was the one who was motivated in this period to actually go and write it all down. At this time in history, probably only 2% of the population could even read and write. So the fact that he was a scribe made him a very important figure. When I start teaching Bible study, people often ask about the Catholic Bible and the extra books that are in the Bible called the Apocrypha. These are later writings that we don't consider part of the Bible, but that we find valuable for study, for research. And so if you have a Bible with an Apocrypha, or if you can get your hands on one, in the Apocrypha you'll find writings of Esdras. Esdras is the Greek name for Ezra. And so there's a lot of history about this man, a man a lot of us don't know anything about, but without him, we wouldn't have a lot of what we have. And so glory be to God and to the Holy Spirit for giving us the Word, for giving us those like Ezra who were so dedicated to rebuild. And so I don't know what you're rebuilding this week. A lot of us have a lot of work to do to rebuild the lives around us. You'll find great inspiration in Ezra and Nehemiah, so I hope you'll pick them up and read.